Okay, welcome to class. Can everyone hear me okay? Perfect. Hope you guys are all having a good week. And I mean, the weather here in Gunnison is just gorgeous this week. But I've been told by my husband, who actually looks way too much at the meteorological weather. He actually looks at two different weather sites and NOAA's site, and there's competing forecasts. But I think it might actually get to 0 Thursday midnight with a dusting of snow. So it should be interesting to say the least. But it's always good. So, okay, today, first off, I want to start off with homeworks. Thank you all. I graded homework number 1 a couple nights ago, and it was fantastic. Keep up the good work. I really enjoyed them. You guys gave some really thoughtful discussions associated with that. I tried to write a few comments on everyone's just to let you know where I was coming from and what I really liked about your comments. Really, I'm super impressed. I have to admit, it really invigorated me about wanting to teach MBA classes again because of how much work you guys have been putting in, and it's a joy. So thank you. I'm hoping to get homework 2 graded by tomorrow afternoon at the latest. I actually am giving it another exam, and so I can actually get that done instead of lecturing. And so that'll happen tomorrow. And then homework number 3. That's going to be due this coming Sunday. Just as to give you guys, it's kind of a quirky homework number 3, which is why I actually gave you guys an example in this week's content. And again, I'd like you to choose some location preferably, or it's got to be a location that you can do an economic analysis of. You're not actually going to do it, but I want you to find one that'll give us some non-market benefits. So the example I did was hiking Colorado 14ers and how we've come up with different ways of measuring the value of the Colorado 14ers. Now, I've gone up a couple of these. They're fantastic to go up, but I have to admit I really like 13ers instead because there's so much fewer people. I give a whole lecture of this in my lower division or my undergraduate course on natural resource economics about how we value it, and I use Colorado 14ers as an example. Former Governor Colorado Dick Blam, he was quoted in the 1990s in the Time magazine about we're loving these mountains to death and why it's happening. And everyone talks about peak bagging and why the 14ers are so important. And so a couple of economists at Colorado State University have done the primary research on how do you value these. And so I kind of go through an example of that using their research, and actually they're the primary experts on 14ers. And so I want you guys to find some papers associated with how you find a valuation for your area, okay? It could be either something local that you already interact with. It could be a dream vacation if you want to go to Fiji or if you want to go somewhere else. If something you're just interested in, that'd be great. Any of those are options. If you have any questions or problems with this, shoot me an email because this is actually one of the fun things I have. Yes, Dan.
So I've actually started on this already and was working on it this afternoon. And call me Seth.
Oh, sorry, Seth.
No. Seth is our overachiever. Oh, he's not here. Sorry. See, everyone else is laughing. And the assignment says, hey, Crescent. The assignment says studies. Look for studies. I'm particularly looking at Browns Canyon National Monument.
Cool.
And are you actually wanting these type of studies that have been done, or articles and other things that speak to the intrinsic value and things like that?
You can do either.
Okay.
Okay. And sorry, I should have given you a warning beforehand. I am actually, there's a 40-minute period we don't know where my 13-year-old is going to be, and he doesn't know where both my husband and I are in class right now. So I've got my cell phone on in case he calls.
No worries.
Sorry about the interruption. Sorry, his sister is wondering where he's at, and I don't know where he's at. So, sorry. So that's why I'm checking my phone all the time when these things come in. Sorry. Go ahead. Ask your question again.
I'm not finding a lot of studies. I'm finding a lot of opinion pieces and even some governmental documents about the establishment of the national monument that speak to the intrinsic value. But the assignment says studies, and so I just wanted to clarify what exactly you were looking for in terms of our sources.
Okay, so Browns Canyon is really interesting because it's so newly declared.
Right.
So you're probably not going to find a exact economic study associated with it.
Right.
So in my example I gave you, I said, for 14ers, I'm finding the same economist did all of the research on Colorado 14ers.
Gotcha.
So I expanded out to hiking was an additional one.
Gotcha.
So I would include one from something local of some of the opinion pieces about why it became protected, and then also maybe expand it out saying, hey, here's one that's talking about whitewater recreation.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Other questions? Oh, great. Well, shoot me an email if you think of anything later on that might come up. Okay? Because this is actually my joy, is actually doing these type of your research, and I get to read about it, because then I get forced to read and learn new stuff. So I jokingly call my students my research assistants because they introduce me to new stuff. And given your level of writing, I'm really excited about this assignment. So, okay. So today, I just realized about 35 minutes ago that the audio for PowerPoint did not get put in, and now I can't find it. So I don't know what I did with this computer. I thought it was a mouse issue, so I replaced the mouse twice today. I thought it was because it was kept opening things up. So I don't know what's up with my computer. So I will get that re-audioed here later tonight, and it'll be released late tonight. Next week's is already ready to go, so that's not an issue. It's just sorry about the audio for this week. And again, it's ties into that valuation issue, and so that's why I want to make sure to have that audio up. Sorry about that. I thought it was up, and then now I can't find it. I don't know why. So this coming week, or actually for this week, I've got a discussion question that I put on the content page, and it was really looking at we're asked to consider whether valuing non-market commodities. Is it kind of naive to think that we could get numbers to represent such a complex system as an ecosystem? I mean, is it silly for us to do this? Should we do it? Or is a bad number better than no number? So I'd like you guys to get into, I'll put you into breakout groups or small discussion groups. And I'd like you guys to talk about it for about 5 to 7 minutes. When you come back, could I have at least one of you be able to report on what's going on in your group? And I think I'm going to have 4 groups. And just kind of be prepared to answer where your discussion went through that time period. Okay? Questions before I send you guys into breakout groups? Okay, great. I'll send you there. Thank you. Hi, Seth.
Hi, sorry I'm late. My meeting ran just a little late and I just ran.
No worries. Let me put you into a breakout group. Okay.
Okay, great.
So I started talking about the homework assignments, and then we're getting into the discussion question. And the
Okay,
idea is
fantastic.
you guys discuss what's going on, and then have at least one of you report back on what each breakout group discussed.
Perfect. Thank you, Sally.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get back in here. Okay. Hey, sorry, I got booted out of breakout room 1 because my internet is awful.
No worries. Do you want me to try to put you back in?
Yeah, could you?
Yep, I'm putting you in right now.
Thanks, Sally.
You're welcome, Chris. Okay, was that enough time? No?
We could have kept going.
I'm seeing some yeses and some nos. Would you guys want to get back in them for a little bit more? Would that be better? Or do you want to just open it up now?
The answers. It was just an interesting topic.
It was an interesting topic, and I think we were interested to see what the other breakout groups thought, and so maybe that's the best way to continue.
Okay, great. So breakout group, we'll just go through the order tonight. Breakout group 1. Who wants to talk for the group on that one and kind of kick off our discussion of are we naive to think a number can be put onto such a complex topic? And should we put a bad number even if we know it's not, if it's incomplete?
So I guess we've kind of only skimmed the surface of this, but and Seth joined a little late, but I think it's important to have quantifiable, to try to quantify this information. But there was definitely concerns about the accuracy of the information. And that's kind of where our conversation went. Seth, do you want to expand on what you were?
Yeah, I was just thinking that it's absolutely important. And obviously it started in the 1940s, and there have been new frameworks besides just the CV brought in. Yes, it's hard to take qualitative information and put quant numbers behind it, but I do believe if you don't have anything, you're not able to decide anything. So I understand some of this information may have an asterisk on it, and I do believe that asterisk is just as important as the number, and understanding, you know, the complexities of trying to figure out this number. But I also liked how some of the studies actually, you know, put it as a 0 economic gain or loss, but the asterisk is that we have not been able to actively identify this cost or benefit. But this topic must be brought up. And then it goes into the thought that they have to not only take the econ part of it, but then they have to take the philosophy and moral part of it too. And they have to use that asterisk as part of the conversation.
That's a great point. Does anyone else want to elaborate on this from any of the other breakout groups?
I can dig into that. That's a good segue, at least for what Sam and Dan and I spoke about. You know, thinking about the valuation of the outdoors and thinking about public land takeovers by private industry, at least in the Arctic Wildlife Refuge, at least in Bears Ears. You know, there's oil prospect there, natural gas prospect there. And thinking about what is the aggregate sum of these resources. Are they there? Are they intact? Do they belong in the land? And can they be part of an economic industry that will perpetuate without said disruption in the petroleum industry? Or is the value greater than if they were to interrupt that space right now?
Right.
We then begin to get into the topic of externalities in that, are we going down a slippery slope path if said A or B path were disrupting these natural spaces and, you know, basically changing something we can no longer take back?
Right. And that's actually one of the naivety questions I was asking was, when we say we want to do restoration after the fact, do we really know if we can actually restore a habitat back to the way it was before? And most ecologists will say there's no way we possibly can. We can get close, but an example I always give is Blue Mesa Reservoir, okay, which started filling in 1964, and we actually had to go to one of its lowest times this last summer in the spring, and we could actually see some of the old home sites and the old flagpole from Iola, and it was really interesting in that standpoint. But the flip side, I asked my students, why didn't it come back and have the same plants that it was before? And they're like, oh, the seeds aren't there. And I said, it's also the microbes in the soil. We don't have a good way to economically evaluate having those microbes. They've been now flooded for 60 years. They're not coming back. We don't have a way of measuring how important are they to ecosystem health. We know they're important, but we don't have a good valuation of them because nobody's paid for a study to do this economic valuation. Okay. Breakout group 2 or 4, do you have anything else to add to this?
We talked a little bit about how numbers mean different things to different people. And so essentially, like, by quantifying it, even though it's, sometimes it can be a defense mechanism for these non-extractive resources, it can also be used against that argument. And Rich had a really good example of being, in Lake City and a moose being shot, and like people could like put all these things against how much money these different economies were brought in, and it caused a lot of controversy. And it's like, well, was it really, are we doing it accurately, right? Like, that's the other part. It goes back to that accuracy conversation. But at the end of the day, what if that's how we as a society value things with this dollar amount? Like, what else are we supposed to do?
Yeah. Nope. You guys have hit a lot of the main issues and why, as an economist, I am asked to do some of these, but I'm also hesitant to come up and say I am 100% sure my number is accurate.
Right.
One piece I didn't have you read was an article that talks about these valuations, but in particular stressing that as an economist, I think of this, the number I come up with is actually probably the lower bound of the true valuation. Okay, that I know I'm not counting everything, so I'm probably giving a fairly conservative estimate on that value of that moose. There's value from a meat source, there's value from the hunting industry, but there's also from the viewership. There's also then the ecological value of having the main herbivore wandering around right around the river valley, and what's it doing to the ecology in that area. And so I talk a lot about my number being that lower bound. Okay, it's the best I can do, but don't expect this to be any very high, because I usually take a fairly conservative attitude towards it.
I think there's another aspect
Uh-huh.
in that of it seems that we're kind of going through a major shift within the outdoor industry and within the world in and of itself, with technology, luxury, the kind of option to use these sites, but also with housing.
Yep.
And so as we look kind of to the future, measuring all these things, how are we viewing the future? Are we going to be measuring these like Alaska? Alaska has tons of room for housing. There is plenty of room for plenty of people with plenty of resources if we don't use them in the same, kind of boneheaded way that we have in the past. But that takes away from the ability to access them in a way.
Yeah.
So how are we valuing these? Are we valuing them for the continued, for lack of a better kind of concept, the continued survival of our species, and the kind of to combat the buildup of that's kind of happening in society? Or are we just quantifying them to quantify them? Is it useful quantifying versus just kind of blowing numbers up our ass?
Yes, and that's actually where I get into a lot of is, what was the original purpose of the study? I mean, who funded it? What were they really trying to measure? And then can I take part of that information and apply it to something new? And that's actually what you guys are going to be looking at this next week, is when we get into the economics of the outdoor industry. I'll give you guys two different studies to look at, and then in particular, not just, but then adding in the, forgetting what it's called, and then giving a specific example of the Forest Service and why they do it. And they actually use a meta study that's got hundreds of examples of it. But it starts getting to the question of, why did you do the actual study, and can I apply it? It's called a benefit transfer technique, to be able to take a study from one area and apply it to somewhere else. How accurate is that application? Okay. An example I use in another course would be, the information I learned from undergraduate education here at Western is wonderful, but could it be applied to Metro State in downtown Denver? Okay. For a while there, the state of Colorado actually had Metro, Mesa, Western, Fort Lewis, and Adams, those 5 schools, all under the exact same board of trustees. So information we glean from Western, we could apply to Mesa and Metro, even though they're completely different campuses and different groups. I'd argue that's actually probably not a good thing to do. So you can only do benefit transfer technique of taking the information you learned from one study and applying it to another, if it's fairly accommodating and fairly similar circumstances. Okay, so talking about expanding housing in Alaska is different than talking about expanding housing in Pennsylvania or here in Colorado or in California. Okay, we have very different outcomes and bases we're starting from. And so you have to be real careful of that. And that's actually what we're going to get into a lot next week. Other comments or questions on this?
I had one, Sally. I've been listening to a lot of hunting podcasts because it's hunting season.
Yep.
And one of the, a lot of them are conservation based and kind of conservation minded. And one of the big topics that keeps coming up when talking to ecologists is when was normal? And, like what is the benchmark? Like what is perfect? What is beautiful? What is happy elk, because 50 years ago, it was way worse than it is today.
Yep.
So it's like there's all these discussions, and it's a good question that no one really has the answer to, but like when is the benchmark? Who sets the benchmark? In whatever industry it is, we might say, outdoor industry is booming, but like, well, back when outdoor sports were the only sports, like maybe more percentage of the population did, it's just things like that. It's hard to, the benchmark thing throws me off because I just don't know where to start,
So I don't have the picture pulled up on my computer, but an example of when, as you say, when is normal would be Georgetown, Colorado. Okay, Georgetown, Colorado is famous now for the Georgetown Loop train. If you go on this train, you get off at their mine area and you can go on a little mine tour. They actually have a picture from the 1890s in the area around Georgetown. Okay, and you look all around the valley, there is not a single tree in the valley. Okay, so if we looked 120 years ago, the normal was no trees in Georgetown. Okay, now when we look at Georgetown, you're thinking, oh wow, there's beautiful trees, there's aspen, there's a lot of deciduous trees and evergreens. So which one's normal? Well, why is it 1890 they had no trees? Because they cut them down to use in the mines to hold open the mine shafts. So you have to decide what is, and as you say, normal varies. Okay, like in the New England states, they're actually losing farmland and it's becoming more forest land. And so that's becoming the new normal there, is actually their loss of agricultural land. Well, compared to what? Pre-human? Okay, are you talking human or Western human? And that gets into really controversial things. And so you're right, how do you choose that date of when do we do the comparison? When I teach statistics, I talk a lot about when people are doing comparisons between 2019, what base year are they comparing our percentage change from? Okay, if you want to make Western look absolutely horrible, you compare your base change in economic, a percentage of our income coming from the state. You use 2006. Western looks like we were all dependent on the state 100% compared to what we are now. When most people would say, well, why'd you choose that year? Well, we had a readjustment. So Western's basically accounting book got morphed really weird that year. So all the other schools use it as the baseline to compare and throw Western under the bus, basically, to show that we're not financially viable. Based on the baseline, that's a weird year. Okay, and so that's what I always ask my students. If I change the baseline, that base year, what impacts that percentage change? And that's why I ask them, my upper division students, to do robust studies of change the baseline. And if you start getting really different answers, you're not being a honest statistician. And so that's why, as you say, that baseline really does matter.
I think the reintroduction of species is another good example of like, what's normal? What's, how was it before when we had wolves and now we don't have wolves? And do we really want to put them back? Why don't we put grizzly bears back in there too? So yeah, complicated.
Oh, it is. It is very complicated.
Well, then time like into the future as well. Like we chatted briefly about is, for instance, like how busy, like you mentioned, 14ers are, make it more valuable, or does it make it less valuable given that they're so busy? Like, so there's that, that change of time, or saying, like, as we develop these natural areas into open space and recreational space, like, does that value of them go up or does it go down actually?
Right. And a lot of people would argue, oh, the more resources I put in there. So let's say I put in a nice trailhead. So it's got bathrooms, it's got decent parking. That should make the value go up. But from a recreational standpoint, that might not be the best. I enjoy being on a peak without 100 people up there. So it's again, how do you value it? And it's a tough question. Okay. So good. I'm glad I'm hoping everyone's now going, well, crud, how do we come up with these?
One question I have with that, Sally, what's the normal standard deviation of error with the current CVs that are out there or that have been completed?
Yes, so that's actually a fabulous question. So contingent valuations are surveys of asking people their valuation, okay? And actually, technically the standard error should be about 3.5% if you have a sample of over 400, if you've actually gotten a decent population. But I can give you examples where CVs are absolutely horrible. I mean, and that's, so a little history on the CV, and I'm not trying to remember if the PowerPoint went through it enough. Contingent valuations, again, have been going on. The first proposed one was from the 1940s. We talk about one coming from the hunting industry in the 1950s. We actually had a watershed moment thanks to the Exxon Valdez oil spill, okay, because the state of Alaska was going to sue Exxon, but they needed to know how much to sue them for damaging 1,300 miles of pristine Alaskan coastline. And so they started asking survey questions and started asking people who would come to Alaska as tourists. Valuing the fishing industry was pretty straightforward, but it was how much would tourists be willing to pay, or how many tourist dollars are we going to lose because of this? And so Alaska started asking questions, and Exxon Valdez very smartly said, we're going to ask economists to start poking holes in the contingent valuation. And so in the slides, the PowerPoint slide deck for this week, I go through all those biases. More than half of those biases were proven through Exxon Valdez research, okay? And this research really did try to poke holes and show why it's bad. What this eventually led to was that NOAA guidelines that are near 2/3 of the way through the slide deck that talk about what makes a good CV. The problem with them is to follow the NOAA guidelines is shockingly expensive. I mean, everyone comes to me saying, oh, I want to run a survey. It's super quick and easy. And I said, surveys are never quick and easy. They're expensive propositions. To do them well, you're talking $100 per survey minimum. Everyone's like, what are you talking about? I can just throw it out on SurveyMonkey and ask some people to fill it out. You don't have a good representative sample, and you haven't tested your questions. You're not sure you're getting the right answers. And so that's really where that CV is at. I'm hoping to make you all nervous about contingent valuations or survey questions, and make you realize why, as an economist, I understand them. I've read a ton of them. I've actually done one, and I still question the results associated with them. Okay? Questions? Okay. So for this coming week, almost all of you still need to be working on homework number 3, again, which is going to be just choosing your own place to do evaluation process with it. Try to find some studies associated with it. If you can find an economic one, that'd be great, but some of them you're not going to be able to find, so you have to kind of back up of, okay, if I'm really looking at valuing, let's say, hiking in Iceland, what's the economic value of that? I might find one study that's translated into English. If not, then I'm going to back it out and look at just a general hiking study in addition. Okay. Questions overall? Okay.
I kind of have a question. So,
I
keep thinking of the same things like hiking and walking and standing and gawking and like. Can you elaborate on some other types of things that we could value? Could I value like the Scottish Linksland and like golf to the country of Scotland, or like kiteboarding in Antigua, or the value of wind in the ocean? I don't know.
Yes, on all of those. Okay. The problem with doing the Scottish golf one is I would argue that we already have a pretty good market valuation associated with it, because I could look at how much money is generated by golfing in Scotland. Okay. But from a non-market standpoint, what's the value of Scottish golf versus American golf? American golf courses are fairly pristine. Our rough is actually not very rough, while Scottish ones could be a foot tall of grasses. that you're trying to
It's a
deal
totally different business model as well. Like American golf is very private, where all Scottish golf courses are public land. So there's a different, so we went, like I used to live in a community where they wanted to shut the golf course down and make it open space.
Yep.
Like what's the value of that versus subsidizing the golf course and so on and so forth. There was like this huge like small town politics battle over like the land, which was really interesting. But in Scotland, it's public lands. So, but people are very, they have better etiquette in general.
Yep.
Life, I feel like. So they're like, oh, someone's coming. I'm just going to wait here with my dog instead of like running out there and getting hit and then yelling at somebody and trying to like fight. So, they're two different kind of business plans, because the Linksland, where a lot of the golf courses are built, was a nothing piece of land. It was the land that connected the ocean to the farmland and really had no value at all. And that's why, the game kind of arose on these swaths of land with very little, very natural, whereas America, it's very different. So, but, to your point, there is a value on that, but the money's used a lot differently there than it is here. And yes, Sam, you're welcome for the golf history lesson. But, like this is a very broad topic, and all the things we brought up, and it's like the value of things to who?
Yep.
The value of a 14er to me is not as great as probably everybody else in this class. Like I'm not into hiking. I don't know. It makes me sweaty and irritable. But, I value other things differently, and everyone does. Like I hike for different reasons. I hike to get like a good line on my snowboard, or I hike to like go kill an animal or whatever, but I don't hike just to like hike. I don't run just to run. I run if I'm being chased, that's about it. But, I'm just looking for some other options and opportunities, like as to how we can, because if we all come up with the same thing, like what's the value of like Moab?
Right.
It's not going to be a very interesting read for you by any means.
Yep. Okay. You could easily do it of the value of snorkeling down off the Australian Great Barrier Reef. You could do it. I mean, I'll pull up a paper that you guys are going to read here sometime this week for the next whole unit, and it's coming from the National Forest Service, and they have 14 activities that they recognize within the National Forest Service. So cross-country skiing, camping, fishing, hiking, hunting, motorized boat, nature-related. This can be wildlife viewing, historic sites, off-road vehicles, other recreation. This can include horseback riding, relaxing, picnicking. All of those are other examples that you can do. And so it doesn't have to just be, as you're right, I've definitely been biased of hiking because that's what a lot of people have been doing this fall. But I'm willing to let you go with almost anything you want to try to come up with these additional valuations. Okay?
So is like leaf peeping in Maine, is that like a legit topic?
Yes.
That's crazy to me, but I mean, I like that. This is interesting. This is exciting.
So an example from where my husband's family has a farm would be coming down to see the prairie chickens dance and the economic activity associated with that. And by the way, you talk about golf courses. In the United States, golf courses are now being purchased off, especially in the Western United States, for their water rights. And
yeah, great water rights.
Yeah,
unlimited water rights to the Roaring Fork River at Aspen Glen, if anyone cares. And all the water flows directly back into the river. Maybe.
Most. But but I know a couple golf courses actually in Denver are about to lose and be purchased by Denver Water Board, purely not for the land, but for the water that they have, which everyone thinks is crazy because land in Denver is so valuable. But Denver Water sees the value in the water. So, a little off topic, but
no, all valuable. All right, so I'm thinking outside the box because we talked a little bit about it, but like the value of like the Northern Lights to like Iceland's tourist economy, like is that am I onto something here, or is this like totally out of nowhere?
Nope, that's exactly one that you could definitely do. Okay. I know when I lived in Iceland, there was a study that came out that talked about the value of a puffin, and not just a puffin on the plate, but a puffin to be able to see it on the cliff in Iceland, and how much economic value that's generating for Iceland itself. Other questions? Fantastic. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. I'll try to respond within at least 24 hours, if not sooner. Thank you again. I'm really enjoying the class. Tell me if there's something you'd like me to do a little differently or not. I'll try to take the suggestions into consideration. Otherwise, have a fabulous week, and I will see you all here next Tuesday night.
Can I talk to you about homework number 2 real fast?
Yes. Do you
Thanks, Sally.
Thanks, Sally.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, Sally. See ya.
Peace.
Sally, one quick question, and thank you to Mark. Can I jump in one sec? Thanks for letting me show up a little bit late. One question I had to do with that with regard to Chris's question, marine park management and scuba diving. That seems like it's something that's never been really done, and I know a lot of Caribbean and other places are doing that. So that's still in the wheelhouse too. Okay.
But I do know actually Australia, some economists in Australia are really focusing in on what's the value of the scuba industry to Australia and snorkeling and what's going on. So there's lots of studies out there for that.
I figured as much with global climate change and coral bleaching. It's coming up a lot more for that stuff. So
it is definitely. So
thank you for bringing me in late. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Have a great week.